Hi, APES learners. So this is going to be lecture one, and I'm going to share my screen with you. So let me go ahead and do that. Give me just a second. All right. What's going on here? All right, let's get to the top page here. Maybe I can make this. There we go. Let's move my head over so that way it's not too much in the way. All right, so this is lecture one, and this is going to be on biomes and food webs. What you're going to want to do is do this lecture first, then you're going to want to read chapter 4 and 5 afterward. And then this is covering 5, actually maybe even 10 standards. Let me add right here, and 1 point. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 different standards. I'm going to roughly cover some of these. So here's what I want you to do. I need you to get a yellow Post-it. It cannot be fluorescent because it will stain the book. What you're going to do is you are going to turn to page 61 in your textbook, and you're going to copy down this Post-it. Know this hierarchy and where ecosystem falls and what it is. And so what I'm talking about hierarchy is the fact that the biosphere is kind of this big overarching, the sum of all living things on Earth, um, in which they live. Bio meaning life, right? And sphere meaning the part of Earth. Then landscape, this is a region that includes possible different ecosystems, not just one. Then you've got just an ecosystem, and an ecosystem is both living and non-living, and it's how they interact. So of course, living is, plants and critters and stuff. Non-living could be things like water, the air temperature, the soil, the rocks, and what have you. You need to know that a community is part of an ecosystem. So you're noticing the trend as we go down the hierarchy, we're zooming in and getting more focused. So a community is a set of populations. So this is multiple species. And you can see the picture like fish and coral reef and a turtle. Then a population is just one species, and realize that one species could live in more than one ecosystem. So we don't just call it a species, but it is a population of that species in that specific community, which is in that specific ecosystem. And then of course you have just the one organism. So that is just the one little community member, the one species that's in that population, the individual. All right, the next page. So if you need to pause, you probably should pause and make that Post-it. By the way, I said that it's standard 1.1 in case you're wondering. The next page is page 94, right? So you can see here, that's page 94. This map right here is pretty important because it lays out all of the various biomes. What I want you to know is the trend that goes along with the latitude. And you can see on the map here, they've got some latitudes. And I don't know, you can see that this light purple is running across the top. What's light purple? Oh, the tundra. And then right below that, it tends to be the boreal forest. Now it gets a little bit mixed up. Right just north of 23.5, right? You see a lot of different biomes depending on where we are in the world. That's okay. I mean, just look at Africa alone or South America. They're filled with a lot of biomes. So the trends are very apparent up at top, and as you go down and approach the equator and even below the equator, they become kind of mixed, and it's really going to depend. All right, so you're going to want to pause that and tell yourself this Post-it. This is standard 1.2, which is all about terrestrial biomes. The next page is the one right next door. Um, what you need to know, let me move my face out of the way. There we go. So a biome is a major regional area and they have similar communities. And so on our previous page, we noticed that there might be a desert biome in the United States, but there's also one in Africa, right? So it could be a similar region, doesn't have to be in the same place. It is often recognized by its dominant plant species. Now, of course, the animals live there, but typically we define it by the plant species. And we typically define it by the temperature of the area and the precipitation. So those two things really dictate the name of the bio. And that's because you'll have similar temperatures and similar rainfall patterns. I'm not saying it's set in stone, but you're going to see similar patterns across latitudes as our planet goes, above the equator and below the equator. And then this graphic is just kind of nice. All right, so again, this was on, did I tell you what page? Probably not. Oh, 95. So this was page 95, the one right next to it. And you're going to want to pause it and create that post-it for yourself. All right, the next page. Well, by the way, you're going to read all about the individual biomes. So this is page 100. Sorry, this is page 100, and you notice that I skipped a bunch of sections in the book. It's not because I don't want you to know about each of the individual biomes, but because I do, and you should probably pay attention to the graphs for each of them, because those graphs are graphing rainfall and temperature throughout the 12 months. And remember, those are what define terrestrial biomes. What I have here is the underlined names: taiga, temperate forest, temperate seasonal forest. Those, let me make sure I'm going to get this right. I don't want to screw this up. Hold on, let me look at my book. Okay, the underlined names are, here, I'll write this. I'll write it in blue. The underlined stuff is what College Board calls the biomes. The non-underlined stuff, we'll do that in red, like the boreal forest, is what our textbook calls the biomes. Okay, so this is confusing. Why are there different names? Well, I don't know, because different scientists name it different things. So the taiga is what College Board wants you to know. This textbook calls it the boreal forest. And so you should know the temperature and the rainfall of that region. Some of them are the same. So temperate rainforest is called temperate rainforest. Temperate seasonal forest is called temperate deciduous forest. So notice the subtle difference between seasonal and deciduous. Tropical rainforest is the same. Shrubland versus chaparral. So College Board calls it shrubland, and chaparral is what this book calls it, by the way. Where we live is a chaparral area. Sometimes it could be a temperate deciduous forest as well, like as you get up into the foothills, by like El Dorado Hills and on up into Placer, because you have seasonal trees. A seasonal tree changes its colors versus what is it? Temperate. What is our regular temperate seasonal forest? I'm not sure where like Lake Tahoe is falling. I'd have to look that up. Sorry, I don't know that off the top of my head. Apparently, though, I do want to skip down because you can go through this yourself. You don't need to know tropical dry forests, and you don't need to know temperate grasslands. Why is this locking up on you? Zoom is locking. Hold on. Pause technical difficulties. What is happening? Is it no longer sharing? Darn. And I really Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen really quick because something's going on. And then I'm going to reshare my screen. Sorry about that, you guys. Very first lecture here, and we've got some technical difficulties. Give me just a second. Oh, come on. Okay, I'm going to pause this video. All right, so I resumed my recording. Hey, that's cool. I figured out how to pause my recording. All right, sorry that I wasted your time a little bit there. You could just fast forward. All right, so and I say I guess on this post-it just because College Board is not asking you to know tropical dry forests or temperate grasslands, but I mean, that's kind of silly because they are regions of the planet that I'm sure that you probably will need to reference, but specifically they are not calling out those two biomes. All right, the next page is the one right next door. These are aquatic biomes. So there's only 2 chapters on aquatic biomes. So aquatic biomes really are consistent of freshwater and marine. Freshwater, by the way, are lakes, rivers, streams, ponds. And then the marine biome consists of, let's see, oceans, of course, coral reefs, marshlands, and estuaries. So you need to know that those are the 2 main biomes, but you should know what's in them. Now, each of these biomes are shaped by a lot of different things. Water temperature, salinity, right? How much salt is in there, dissolved nutrients. So those are things like nitrogen, carbon, oxygen, all that good stuff. The wave action, if it's an ocean, the currents, because remember that rivers even have currents. The depth, so how deep it is. For example, Lake Tahoe is one of the deepest lakes around. It's super deep versus Clear Lake, really, really shallow. Light levels, because depth also affects the light levels, but light levels are also affected by how murky or how much sediment is in the water. And then the type of substrate. Substrate is what's on the ground. So is it sand? Is it stone? Is it gravel? Is it, soupy, peanut buttery mud? Oh, why does this keep getting, oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm gonna pause this again. Pause share. No. Stop video. No, I want to pause my video. Pause. All right. The next page that I'd like you to focus on is this is going to be standard 1.9 and 111. So we're going to jump down, actually jump back to page 81 in your textbook. This is part of chapter 4. So basically, I just wanted to let you know some Latin prefixes. Troph means food or feeder, auto means self, and hetero means other. So if you have an autotroph, you are a self-feeder. Well, what organism do we know that can feed itself? Well, that's plants, right? Heterotroph means other feeder. I have to feed on other things, so that would be any non-plant. So insects all the way up to lions and elephants and everything in between. I want to remind you right here that a community is considered multiple populations of species, not just one, and it's how they interact and or coexist, because sometimes they just coexist, they don't interact with each other. So that's what's important on this page. And then you've got page 82. This touches on standard 110, and basically this is the 10% rule. See that graph right over here? This is an important graph. So you have, if you notice the numbers, 1,110 and then 1. And why did they specifically pick 1,000? That's because 90% of all biomass, or sorry, 90% of all energy is lost as you move up the food chain or as you go up what we call trophic levels. And that energy is lost to things, they call it cellular respiration, but it's the animal has to move, the animal has to live and do bodily functions, repair, It takes energy to exist, but only 10% of it is stored in the animal's like flesh and bones or shells or whatever it is that makes up that organism. Energy, or I'm sorry, so energy follows this trend, so it's transferred, but realize that energy is stored as biomass. So if you were to take all in a certain ecosystem and like cut up all the trees and grass, those are the producers, you would find that it is the largest biomass. You put it on a scale. Of course, we don't chop it all off and put it on a scale. There's other ways to figure that out. But you put it on a scale, and let's pretend like it weighs 1,000 pounds. And then you look at the very first consumers, we call them primary consumers, and you gather them all, put them on a scale, they would only weigh 100 pounds, let's say, and then so on and so forth. This is a good thing because let's say you had a ton of eagles up at the top. Well, what do you think would happen? What would happen to this little chipmunk looking thing if there were way more eagles than chipmunks? Obviously, they would get overeaten, then the owls would starve to death, and you've got some wonky population issues going on in a really unhealthy ecosystem. So in general, scientists have studied ecosystems all over the place, and they have found this general trend. It's called the 10% rule, and only 10% of energy is stored at each hierarchy of the trophic level, and it is stored in biomass. So you can see that in the biomass that goes up the food chain or the trophic levels. And oh, yay. Okay. And that's it. So I hope you enjoyed our very first lecture here. Have a great day. See you for now.